Welcome to Gaslit Nation. I am your host, Andrea Chalupa, a journalist and filmmaker and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller Mr. Jones, about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine, the film the Kremlin doesn't want you to see, so be sure to watch it. First, a couple announcements. We are running a very special summer series called The Future of Dictatorship: What's Next and Ways to Resist. This series features leading voices on the front lines of understanding AI, corporate surveillance, Silicon Valley greed, and more. Because the dictator's playbook remains the same, but the technology they have to oppress us keeps changing. You can learn more about the dictator's playbook in the Gaslit Nation graphic novel, Dictatorship, It's Easier Than You Think. You can join me for a special night out in New York City to talk all about the making of that book on Saturday, August 5th at 4 p.m. at the fun Lower East Side bar Caveat, where I will be in discussion with the comedian Kevin Allison of the hugely popular Risk Storytelling podcast. If you're not in New York, you can join us by live stream. This is a huge deal for me because I hardly go out. So this will be like a Gaslit Nation prom night. Join me at Caveat on August 5th in New York. Signed copies of the Gaslit Nation graphic novel will be available for order at the event. For details on how to join us in person or live stream, go to gaslitnationpod.com and you'll see the link right on our homepage with more information about the event. Go to gaslitnationpod.com. That's gaslitnationpod.com. We'll be back with all new episodes of Gaslit Nation in September, including a live taping with Terrell Starr of the Black Diplomats podcast, reporting from Ukraine. That's right, Terrell's going to be in Ukraine, and we're going to hear all about his summer, his reporting trips, what he's learning, who he's talking to, and what's next. That live taping will take place on Tuesday, September 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern for our supporters at the Truth Teller level and higher on Patreon. Come join us for that and drop questions in the chat. And hope to see as many of our listeners as I can on August 5th in New York at Caveat for a fun night out. Before we get to this week's guest, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Judge Lackey, the wily narrator of the new Gaslit Nation graphic novel, Dictatorship, It's Easier Than You Think.
You're getting sleepy. Very sleepy. When I snap my fingers, you will obey my every command, starting with, always win, but never completely. The dictator must be an unlikely hero who is constantly winning, yet under siege. The battles can never stop. Now wake up and seize power by reading Dictatorship. It's easier than you think. Almost too easy.
Here is part 2 of my discussion with Douglas Rushkoff. I'm going to read now from his bio. Douglas Rushkoff is an author and documentarian who studies human anatomy in a digital age. His 20 books include the just published Survival of the Richest, Escape Fantasies of the Tech Billionaires. An extraordinary read, I have to tell you, it's chilling. Chilling how dumb the tech billionaires are. As well as the recent Team Human, another essential read, love that book, based on his podcast and the bestsellers Present Shock, Throwing Rocks, and the Google Bus Program or Be Programmed, Life Inc., and Media Virus. He also made the PBS Frontline documentaries Generation Like, The Persuaders, and Merchants of Cool. His book Coercion won the Marshall McLuhan Award, and the Media Ecology Association honored him with the first Neil Postman Award for Career Achievement in Public Intellectual Activity. This is part 2 of our conversation. And what about a universal income? Do you see that as something that we should be agitating for, or do you see it as just another control mechanism on the population?
I mean, it depends. Most of the models of them are stupid, but I think it's a great transition mechanism. Really what we want is universal basic assets that everybody owns. It's more 40 acres and a mule than $40 a week. You know, it's what do you own? When you look at inequality, particularly economic inequality across races, it's less the amount of money that they're earning, but the amount of generational wealth that's been accumulated. So if you have generational wealth and you send your kid to college, your kid can spend a year after college making no money, doing internships and developing their career, whereas someone who isn't sitting on wealth, that kid's going to have to work right out of school and start paying back their loans. So it's like it looks like they're equal, but they're starting at a very different starting place with a whole lot less economic padding to allow them to do career and other sorts of development, and that perpetuates. So yeah, universal basic income, universal basic assets, and designing economics around mutual aid, around basic equity. How do you develop enterprises around equity rather than around profit? And that's the work I'm doing now with Institute for the Future. We started something called the Equitable Enterprise Initiative, looking at how can you develop businesses that share equity. And that's more things like cooperatives and platform co-ops and, businesses where everybody owns a piece of the business rather than being an employee for someone else's business. How do you earn equity in the enterprise?
That's really cool. Tell us about that. How does that work?
Well, a lot of businesses are doing it now because a lot of boomers are aging out of their businesses and their kids don't want it. So they sell the business to their employees. And then when the employees own the business, they're not working for some shareholder, they're working for themselves. And they make decisions, very differently because now they're impacting the neighborhood that they're living in. They want, long-term stability and security. So, it's just a co-op. We look at it like a silly thing, like Israel kibbutzes in the 1960s. Oh, those didn't work and they were lazy people. No, cooperatives do work. Publix, the supermarket chain, is a cooperative. It's a worker-owned cooperative. Even True Value hardware stores they're not a worker cooperative, but they're a small business cooperative. So it's really just independent businesses that buy their stuff together. There's all sorts of cooperatives. There's a great book by Nathan Schneider on cooperatives. It's a great and increasingly used model where workers don't get exploited because they are their own bosses and they make decisions collectively for the benefit of everyone involved. So you get, very different kinds of people at the table. In a traditional business, the shareholder is only in the business in order to be able to sell the shares at a higher price. So that just means growing the business, but it's a bit like selling your business to the mob, right? The mob doesn't care about the restaurant. They're just running money through the restaurant. The restaurant is a name on laundered money. And that's what happens to really any business that goes public. You become a tool of the markets, a tool of financialization rather than whatever enterprise that you're in.
And could that model apply to media? We've lost so many amazing media companies, and newsrooms have been shrinking for decades now. And it's something that a lot of people in media don't like to talk about because it's happened rapidly. There's a lot of shame involved. And a lot of those left standing or entering this profession, they tend to be propped up by their parents' money. And so media, the way we get our news, newsrooms tend to be rich and white. But in the place of it, we've had a lot of independent, podcasts, obviously, and just a lot of independent sites to try to fill that. Do you see this model working for that? And how would that work?
Yeah, well, Associated Press is a cooperative, and that's been around a long time. That's owned by the writers. That's what that is. So yes, it works. Or the, ProPublica is a cooperative, and they're the ones who are coming, basically revealing everything about international politics and money laundering. And so between the two of those, you have two important, well-functioning and prosperous. The ProPublica is not so prosperous. They need a heck of a lot of donation to work right now because people don't value finding out the truth about what's going on in the world, it seems. They prefer the sensationalism of the cable news networks. But no, it definitely works. And it's a media in transition. And we're going to start to see more and more of them. Substack is just kind of discovering now, what about instead of having everyone have their individual Substack, what if there were sort of 10 or 20 people that gathered together into a Substack, and then maybe they get someone who edits their pieces, and then it starts looking like a traditional magazine again with a publisher and an editor. And the great thing about an editor is they do send the piece back to you and say, you need to do a little more here. You need to support this. You need a second source for that claim. And people don't like to hear that. And then they leave them. I quit the magazine because they, censored me. No, they didn't censor you. They asked you to find a source for what you were saying. And that's really different. And I get it. People are immature and they want things their way. I know what it's like to be sent back and have to do more work on something. It sucks. I would take my ball and go home, make my own blog and leave you all alone and get my own subscribers. I don't need you anymore. No, that's part of being in a community. That's part of being in something is you got to listen to some other people.
Absolutely. And maybe fact checkers might even come back.
Yeah, remember them?
Yeah. I'm glad I started when I did. I had to work with a fact checking department, and I was like, oh, God. But I miss them now. It's so sad.
But boy, didn't you hate them at the time?
Oh, yeah, obviously. But
they always send you back. Where'd you get I need to see the notes for this quote.
Yeah, God bless them, wherever they are now. So what about social media and everything that's going on there? It's just getting worse and worse, right? It's just the whole like social media, far right propaganda, like Fox News, OWN, Newsmax. The far right is consolidating. If you go to iTunes or you look at like what the top podcasts are, I don't even know these guys' names anymore. Like all the guys that just got fired from Fox News in the wake of the big Dominion lawsuit. That's who's filling up like the top 100 of political podcasts right now. So it seems like the far right has just been building from success to success and just growing bigger and bigger in terms of the room they're taking up in people's minds and all the noise and division they're creating. Is there any remedy for that?
I mean, it depends who you are. I mean, I don't need a remedy for it because I'm not in there. So I'm lucky, I guess. It's not where I spend my time. I guess it depends if we have an entirely for-profit media space that can leverage sensationalism for money, then we do as Neil Postman warned. We amuse ourselves to death. That's the book he wrote, Amusing Ourselves to Death. And it was about that. I mean, and what he was asking, and this was in the 70s or 80s, he wrote it, and they're a much quainter moment. But he was asking, why is there music on the news? Like, they'll say, like, war in Iraq, dum, da, da, dum, 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 dum. Because what is that? Why is there a soundtrack on it? It's news. And they're turning it into this movie, this entertainment thing. And that was really the beginning. Once news went from a public service requirement of an FCC license to a for-profit entertainment center at the networks, it was kind of all lost because the most successful news is the news that's the most sensationalist. So if you hear, that, Joe Biden is eating babies with Martian Jews, that's going to sell more than whatever's really happening in a place or anywhere, unless the world gets bad enough to justify that sensationalism. I mean, and it really is. It should. The loss of a species or, the enslavement of a bunch of kids in Africa should be that news. And it's not. It's tricky. I mean, I still think that the answers are more on the ground, that the desocialized landscape is part of what encourages people to see the other as so dangerous and horrible. I have relatives who won't visit New York anymore because they've seen on Fox and Newsmax, whatever, that New York is a war zone. They're afraid that if they come, they'll be killed.
It's a bunch of moms with strollers ramming into each other. Like, that's my day-to-day.
I know. In New York, for me, the problem for me with New York is I can't even afford to get a hamburger in New York, much less an apartment. New York is like, I look at New York as like, look at all these rich people that, at least Manhattan, New York, it's all these rich people that I can't even.
It's a billionaire's playground. It's a Saudi prince's playground.
Right.
Yeah.
Bloomberg built this bubble around the place, and the Saudi princes own these apartments they don't even go to. They're just these giant kind of like shares of stock in the sky. These sort of apartment boxes that represent an investment, but there's not like children running around in them. There's not people looking out the windows. They're just empty. I mean, so there's a different problem. It's people meeting it, but it's also, lefties meeting righties, and realizing that they're people too. And they've got, they got some crazy ass views because of what they've been taught about people and things they don't know. But if they meet us, they'll see, oh, and it takes a few good disasters to do that. When my town gets flooded, we got mud flooded after one of the big hurricanes, and it was righties and lefties next to each other digging people out of their houses, digging the mud out of their basements. And when you have that part in common, the parts that you don't have in common really do fade into the background. It's a choice of entertainment. People elected Trump, I think, because that's the TV person they wanted to see on their set, not because of any policy, or they like that show better. And the less dependent we are on the TV show, the more realistic we'll be, I think, about our political choices. And that's just, that's what passes for entertainment. It's reality television. It was the last writer's strike that really brought this. The last writer's strike brought us reality TV because we couldn't pay writers. So we started to do what they called unscripted, which has writers, but they pretend it doesn't. All of Trump's reality shows, whatever, that was all. That wasn't real. None of it's real. The lovers, the spats, the fight, all of those things, the housewives, that's all. The producers give them scripts. I mean, they're acting, but they're reality actors. That's what brought us, the reality star as president. That was it. That's what became entertainment. So if entertainment got better, maybe we wouldn't need this reality crap. And we wouldn't mistake politics for entertainment. Politics is supposed to be boring. Those are nerds. They're geeks. Remember student government? Who went out for that? It was a boring thing. I mean, God bless them. I'm glad, but it wasn't for charismatic people. It was for wonky people.
I was one of those people.
Yeah.
In school, but yeah, and I think Obama came in and he definitely made it cool. Because when I was in high school making phone calls in a candidate's campaign office, it was just me and the candidate, and because no one wanted to sign up for that when you're 16 years old.
And you could look at Obama as the problem, and that the left got its perfect TV character guy. I mean, in some sense, maybe Hillary would have been the one to pick at that point. Who knows?
Right. I mean, who knows? But so what about 2024? We have Biden running again. We have just a whole slate of candidates, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, and of course, Trump. Is it basically a done deal on the Republican side, do you think? Because he's just going to bully the rest into submission. They're not going to be able to get a word in if they hold debates. And it's just going to be Biden and Trump again. Do you think that's where we're headed? I'm not even mentioning DeSantis because he seems to be pretty bogged down with his little mini dictatorship in Florida. What do you see coming for 2024? Do you think it's going to be like a Trump-Biden matchup, or do you think...
I don't know. I'm not really a predictor. I'm an observer. I mean, and what I'm observing is it's really hard for a younger person to credibly run for an office like that. And I think part of the reason is to be president, in some ways, you have to be an institutionalist. You have to believe in the old school big institutions. And when you see a younger person run for president, like a Buttigieg or Amy Klobuchar or somebody, or even DeSantis in that sense, it's like you think there's got to be something wrong with them. It's like Amy Klobuchar, oh, she's like this kind of cheerleader person, or Buttigieg, he must be like CIA or something for him to have faith in, because he's young, he's younger than us. It's like, that doesn't make sense. And with Biden, it's like he's old enough that you can go, oh, I believe that he really believes in government, because he's from so old, they're so stupid, they actually believe, they have faith in this thing. And that's a problem. So it's sort of like what we're contending with is, how do you have a president in a post-institutional age, in an age when no one of right mind or normal age believes in the efficacy or validity of institutions? It's tricky. So I feel like we're going to need, in the end, people coming in who, rather than competing on their faith, are competing in their realism. That, I get it, government's flawed. This is a really screwed up system. And they're sort of make the best of it candidates. It's a very Gen X kind of understanding of it, of like, look, this is intrinsically flawed. We're going to have to go in and see what can be salvaged from the wreckage of government.
What about Gen Z that's coming up? They seem obviously more tolerant, more open-minded. They're organizing politically. They're going to be voting in increasingly larger numbers.
You have Republicans terrified of this and trying to close whatever polling places they can on college campuses and so on. With Gen Z, when they're going to start to become the members of Congress rising up through the ranks, do you see this being a more progressive time for our country that we're headed towards?
Well, it depends. I mean, progressive is a tricky word, because progressive means incremental progress. And I wonder if Gen Z is progressive or absolutist. What will they bring? But the Republicans are scared of Gen Z because they see sweeping system-wide change, right? They look at AOC or somebody and they say, oh my God, she's going to come and do this everywhere all at once. Everywhere, everything all at once will happen. And they're afraid of that. And I think it is because Gen Z does have, to some extent, they have a very scaled, system-wide understanding of the world, which is part of why I'm trying to suggest that scale itself may be the problem, that solutions are very local, communitarian, person to person, and to build up as much of that as we can so that we're less dependent on the big scaled national solutions for anything. It's sort of like, yes, I want big government to function, but I want big government to be burdened with as little as possible. Let big government take care of the big problems, nukes and starvation and whatever. And let's us take care of each other as best we can rather than look to these highly brittle, centralized institutions for day-to-day sustenance.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you about the book bannings. For the generation coming up after Gen Z, the kids in elementary school who are going to be coming up through school systems where their librarians are under attack, where books are disappearing from shelves, where there's probably even like a teacher exodus because of the immense pressure that teachers are falling under. Where do you see that heading? Like, how can we push back against that?
Well, it's interesting. The librarian who quit in the small public school district that I know of near me, she quit because they banned The Simpsons, right? And they banned The Simpsons because, The Simpsons graphic novels, because on The Simpsons, they have a stereotypical racist depiction, I guess, of an Indian 7-Eleven convenience store owner, the guy Apu or whatever. And I get it, but it was interesting because I heard she left because of banned books. And I'm like, I had heard that they took To Kill a Mockingbird or something and became, instead of it being required, it became off the canon for whatever reasons. They don't like that. The other side doesn't like that one. And then I heard of it. It was this one that sent her away. She's like, The Simpsons? I refuse. I'm gone. So there's a brittleness to the environment itself. And I realize, yes, the Floridian, racist book bannings are worse than whatever they are, whether it's, the white fragility or social justice bannings of books that they feel contain racist depictions. They're on different scales of harm, but they reflect a common brittleness, the common error of, even if you don't like the thing. When my wife was pregnant, the thing to do was the pregnant person was supposed to have no peanuts and no dairy in hopes that the child then wouldn't be allergic to those things. Now, they have the pregnant mothers have a lot of dairy and a lot of nuts so that the child is not allergic to those things. And the latter one seems to work better. Exposure. Kids who play in dirt have better immune systems, right? So I think kids who have to confront a racist depiction and are able to discuss, how did that make you feel? What environment was this created? What do we think now? Is just as important, as people in Florida learning that slavery happened. It happened. It doesn't have to make the white child feel bad about themselves. The fact that they are in a society where they are still benefiting from the work that was done by the grandparents of the kid sitting next to you in that room. Sorry, but it's a resilience that we need to teach rather than arguing over the books and things themselves. I feel like we are in a brittle atmosphere that is only compensated for with more discussion, human to human engagement in real ways, not just, fighting at school board meetings.
Do you think America's headed for a civil war, and how might tech be driving it?
God, this is all so dark. I think America's in a civil war.
That's darker.
No, but this is what it's like. You're in it. This is it. So now you think, how do we want to end this civil war? Do we want to end it in a flurry of violence or something? Or do we want to see, okay, we see this civil war happening. How do we create a rapprochement between these seemingly, opposed sides, the same sides that were basically opposed in the original Civil War? What is right? Is the nation too big to sustain like this? Do we want to move to something more like the EU? Or if we do that, are we too afraid for our brothers and sisters who end up in the completely oppressed states, where abortion is banned from before you even have sex or something? I don't know how far back into the process can they go, or they make condoms illegal. So I think what we're finding is it's hard to make decisions at scale. It really is. Especially if we don't even agree in universal human rights and what those are. We've ended up in a brittle and contentious environment. We have, 400,000 or 500,000 years of painstakingly evolved mechanisms for establishing rapport in a face-to-face context. And we don't have any of them for doing it at scale in social media and in these big ways. If people focused 90% of their political energy and on mutual aid in their own communities, in active civics, rather than in national voting, it would be just so much easier. It would matter so much less who is president if most of your needs were taken care of by people in normal ways. You don't need all these policies. Yes, I'm glad there's a social safety net from the government as Social Security, but I would much rather have people's friends and neighbors take care of them when they get old.
Yeah, absolutely. I do say on the foreign policy front, because I have friends and family that are right on the front lines in Donbass and the war of Ukraine. So for me, the president matters. Yeah. So I do need.
But wouldn't it be nice if the president was dealing with that rather than book bannings in Florida?
Yes, a million times over.
Right. So the more we could take care of ourselves, then the president could deal with that. I still didn't even know exactly what happened there. I know that Putin went in there with tanks and stuff, and they just saw there's footage from that city that he claims he won, and he just destroyed it. So there's nothing there. It just is, what the fuck, man? And it is interesting, when you try to tell the story to a kid, it's like, okay, there's a bully who went in and he's killing lots of people and taking it. Why can't we stop him? Oh, because he's got nukes and we're afraid he'll blow up the world or something if we try to stop him. Talk about existential fear. That's a really fucked up thing to try to explain to a kid.
No, absolutely. It's strange times. All the conversations we're being forced to have with our children. So if society should collapse, God forbid, in our lifetime, what is your plan for survival? Have you thought this through? Are you going to be just like roasting hot dogs in your driveway and having a big cookout and everyone's welcome? Because I'll come.
Yeah, but I will run out of hot dogs on the first night.
Yeah.
I live, pretty close to an urban center. So the complexity of the supply chain is too difficult to overcome. I do think it's our responsibility to have a couple of weeks of food and first aid around for just natural disaster or whatever, or power outage or disruption of some kind. But no, I don't have a prep plan. I've always believed either, we all make it or none of us make it. What would I do? I guess I could get cans of tuna and batteries, things to trade. I'm looking at it a little bit more macro. In other words, if we're going to be in the desert for a few generations, or more. In other words, if the thing that we know is kind of ending and we're moving into an interregnum before the next thing, then what's important to me is more on a civilizational level. What values do we want people to take with them? How do you prepare for the desert? It's like looking at the Torah when the Israelites are going to leave Egypt. So if we leave this civilization, this death cult of capitalism that we're in, this world of false idols, that we go through the plagues and watch our idols be destroyed and are rebirthed into the desert, what do we take with us? And that's kind of why I'm writing. That's why I'm thinking. That's what will be our equivalent of Torah in our exile. And I think that might be, and whatever things you do to prepare yourself to live more actually resiliently also reduce the possibility of the bad thing happening. The more sustainably we live, the more you depend on your neighbors rather than big centralized supply chains, the more you're doing permaculture agriculture and peer-to-peer trade, the more self-sufficient your towns are, the better they're going to do in an apocalypse, and the less likely an apocalypse has to happen at all.
Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up on our Patreon at the Truth Teller level or higher.
We encourage you to donate to help rescue and recovery efforts in Turkey and Syria following the devastating earthquakes in early February. To help people in Turkey, visit the TPF Türkiye Earthquake Relief Fund at tpfund.org.
To help Syrians in need, donate to the White Helmets at whitehelmets.org. We also encourage you to help support Ukraine by donating to Razom for Ukraine at razomforukraine.org. In addition, we encourage you to donate to the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian relief organization helping refugees from Ukraine, Syria, and Afghanistan. Donate at rescue.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org and avoid products with palm oil. Gaslit Nation is produced by Sarah Kenzier and Andrea Chalupa. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going.
Our production manager is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. Our episodes are edited by Nicholas Torres, and our Patreon exclusive content is edited by Carlin Daigle.
Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle.
Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish.
Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher with the help of Judge Lackey, the narrator of the new Gaslit Nation graphic novel, Dictatorship. It's easier than you think. If you're supporting the show at the producer level or higher on Patreon, thank you so much. If you do not hear your name, you may need to go into your Patreon account and just select your level of support manually to make sure that your name gets into our end credits. So one person that needs to do that is my mother, Tanya Chalupa. I had to find her. She was getting annoyed that she wasn't hearing her name in the end credits. Mom, you got to change your manual level of support on Patreon. Thank you for supporting me all these years. I love you. Withrow C. Newell,
Chickwin,
Lily Wachowski,
Sean Rubin,
Todd S. Perlstein,
Kenny Main,
John Schoenthaler,
Ellen McGirt,
Joel Ferran,
Larry Gasson,
Karen A. Deal,
Nico Phillips,
Brian E. Castor,
Tatiana Birsch,
Karen Heisler,
Ann Bertino,
Chris Bravo, Ruth Ann Harnish,
John Millett,
David East,
Aida,
Joseph Mara Jr., Diana Gallagher,
Julie Matthews,
Meganopolis,
Mark,
Barbara Kittredge,
Matthew Womack,
Sean Berg,
Kristen Kuster,
Kai Gillis,
Sharon Hatrick,
William Barry Reeves,
Richard Smith,
Emmy,
Kevin Gannon,
Mike Christensen,
Sandra Kalnins,
Katie Masuris,
Emily Fenning,
James D. Leonard.
Leo Chalupa.
That's my dad, leave him alone.
Oh, wow.
Carol Golstad,
Jason Benke,
Marcus J. Trent,
Joe Darcy,
Ann Marshall,
Jeremy Lewis,
Trigve,
D.L. Singfield,
Matt Perez,
Nicole Spear,
Abby Road,
Margaret Romero.
Jans Alstrup Rasmussen,
I don't know how to pronounce this.
ZW,
Okay. ZW,
Kathy Kavanaugh,
Sarah Gray,
Jennifer Ann Luter,
John Ripley,
Ethan Mann,
Leah Campbell.
Jared Lombardo,
You are all to report to the Ron DeSantis Re-Education Center, formerly known as Disney's Animal Kingdom, immediately.